Hello.
Okie dokie, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everything that rainbow in between. I'm Pat, and this is Blizzard. Big surprise, it's still very good, and we've made a few adjustments thanks to the existence of Juggernaut. And hold on, I'm gonna check if I actually made this video already. Nope. This is for people who don't want to invest into Meteor for whatever reason, or don't have the gear for it, or want to play just pure Blizzard, because it's got a lot of CC, it's got a lot of control, and it's got damage. It's got damage up the wazoo. It's great. I am of two minds when it comes to whether or not this or Meteor is better. To be sure, we lose Tybalts when we try to run Blizzard Meteor, because we'll need room for Starfall Coronet, as well as wanting a unique piece of armor, rather a legendary piece of armor to store our Juggernaut. There's also a bit less demand on our aspect slots because we don't need to commit too much to Meteor stuff, and we get the value of Ice Spikes and Jifal. Although there is probably a Blizzard Jifal Meteor build out there that I'm gonna think about and probably make a video on next once the new March 5 patch is out, which by the way does not affect this build in any way. It'll still perform very, very well, and it's probably the first thing I'm gonna bring into the vaults for Sorceress. Anyway, the build is simple. It uses Blizzard, it uses Firebolt to apply dots. Neither of them are there for damage. They are there for their high lucky hit chance proc. And I am still firmly convinced that the Firebolt enchantment, when it sets things on fire via your skills, is not reading the original skill's lucky hit chance. It is reading Firebolt's lucky hit chance, which is what, really high? Like 63% for me before a lot of extra buffs. And then we apply all those burnings and blizzard dings, and then hit them with the Jifal, which reads, lucky hit, your damage hit over time effects are fire and blizzard have a chance to erupt, 50% chance to erupt, dealing up to 41,000 damage to the same type of enemies. Now, it can crit and is affected by a lot of things. Not all the things. Edge Masters, for example, does not affect it, but stuff like Storm Swell and Conceited does. Now, there is no aspect of control here because that is awful now. Not really awful, like it is still a lot of damage, but it doesn't really work against bosses super well until they're staggered, and I guess that is our game plan there anyway, but I feel like that is more the consistency. That's the same reason we are, by the way, running Tybalt over Godslayer, which is something I will explain in a little bit, although that might be an option for you if that is so what you desire. To support this strat, we are running Raiment of the Infinite, which, aside from giving us a lot of, well, 2 ranks of Glass Cannon, it also pulls things to us when we teleport, and we stun them for, wow, my roll is terrible, 2 seconds. It's up to 3 seconds. 3 seconds is much better. And it gives us damage to stunned enemies, and also the fact that we can clump them up together, which means their X-Fall explosions can start overlapping, so allowing us to explode a lot of things really, really quickly. There is also an alternative to this that uses the Oculus, and I have a great Oculus, but that's for another day, and I think a different build. This one is very simple. It's a good entry into the style of play, which is basically lay on the blizzards and stay away from bad guys. That's it. You don't need to be close to them, although that option is available because of your teleport via Raiment of the Infinite. Just dash on in there and start stunning them and clumping them together and blowing things up. And if you don't need to kill them because of teleport and our Essus, which allows us to dash away really quickly, because when you dash with an Essu, or evade, is evade the word they use, you get extra movement speed for a little bit. One, it increases your critical strike chance via Essu's ability, which, by the way, you should probably keep dashing whenever you feel like it. It'll probably work out. And 2, let you skip mobs that you don't really need to hurt, especially if you're like fishing for a shrine or something. So it's got speed, it's got control, and it allows you to initiate on a pack aggressively. Like, if there's a lot of them in a small area, make that area a little bit smaller, pull them into the middle of your blizzard, and that's a dog howling, and then have them all explode beside each other. By the way, our main stats are lucky hit and crit. Vulnerable is nice as well. We use it as fill because we have a lot of ways to apply vulnerable, and critical hit strike, which thankfully our Seneschal can provide for us. That's important because neither rings, or Talrashas, nor Jifals actually give us critical strike chance, which is important for making sure those Jifal explosions are valuable when they hit. So that's the gameplay loop. What is it weak against? Well, here. You need to kill them in that first cycle. You need to kill them, your enemies, the monsters, the beasties, before they become unstoppable. Because the moment they become unstoppable, you've got a problem. Because half of your damage it's gone, baby. And then you're in a lot of danger. So if you If you find yourself, without the damage to deal with it, which is why, by the way, we're still also running ice spikes for that extra bit of damage, for that little window we have where we can hurt them as much as possible for maximum value. Either tone down your nightmare dungeons and your vaults, or maybe it's time for a different build. But at 100, it does the job. It'll rip through everything. It does not care. It does enough damage. Now, if the special event does bring us monsters above 154, I'm going to have to do a little bit of testing, see how much damage we need, and to see if this variant is viable, because we might need to start applying the Godslayer helmet and other tricks just to keep our damage, kick our damage up even higher, to make sure that we can get rid of things before the unstoppable part of, monsters kicks in. That's also why we have problems against bosses, because they are largely unstoppable until they are staggered. Now, we don't have a lot of trouble applying stagger, but still, it is a concern. Most of the time, we're not applying our, max potential at them. We need to, stun them and be all anime about it. And the Godslayer discussion, by the way, is never here nor there. If you're not planning on doing the special dungeons that are coming up on March 5, this build, that's it. You're good. You're great. Fantastic. We will only need adjustments, probably, if we get monsters above level 154. Anyway, that's it. Link in the description below. Full build link, rather, if you want to check that out. And leave the video here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, do all the nice things and more before you go, because that will help me out a lot. For the rest of you, we'll discuss gear aspects, Seneschals, skills, and Paragons. Let's get right to it. For our chest armor and helmet, it is Raiment of the Infinite and the aspect of the Juggernaut. Don't worry about the damage while berserking. I just borrowed this off my barbarian. Anyway, that's basically all you want there on that on the helmet, except of course for damage while berserking. You're gonna want lucky hit chance while you have a barrier on it. For our pants, boots, and gloves, not in that order, I guess, Tybalt's Will, of course, for the unstoppable extra damage while you're unstoppable ever. I don't know why my brain is like this. And the way to gain 50 of our primary resource whenever we become unstoppable. As always, a reminder, you cannot become double unstoppable. So if you have Flame Shield active and then teleport while the Flame Shield is still active, you are not going to get the value of getting extra primary resource, but you are going to keep that damage bonus going. Now, there is an argument for replacing Tybalt's Will with regular pants with Juggernaut and your helmet with Godslayer, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the argument mainly is, one, Godslayer has better stats, and you'll have better stats on your pants, because potion capacity and max resource not really important to us. The only thing we want here is the damage reduction to close enemies. But Godslayer works like every 12 seconds, which is not a long time. It'll work a lot in like a 5-minute run. Like 5 times, I think literally 5 times every 60 seconds you proc it like constantly and on time, and you're going to stun a lot of things thanks to your teleport and raiment anyway. But I prefer the consistency as well as the resource support from Tybalt's, because it's enough. It is literally enough damage. It does what it needs to do, while allowing us to gain a little more speed with a greater uptime on damage bonus. Again, once the new endgame event comes out, we will revisit this discussion and see if Godslayer becomes optimal or if Tybalt is still the best call. As is Heirloom to increase our critical strike chance by up to 30% of our movement speed bonus, as well as giving us a lot of ways to gain even more movement speed. I only now realized that my Asus is not 925. Yikes. Wow, I dropped that naturally. Really? Anyway. And for our gloves, you can replace this with a damage buff, with a damage aspect like control or whatever, or even the one for ice blades. You don't really need to use ice blades with that, because, well, you just want the extra damage to vulnerable things, which you're going to do a lot, which still applies even without ice blades on your bar, so that's great. Anyway, that's like a 25% damage buff anyway. The point is, we went with the aspect of fortune to increase our lucky hit chance even further while we have a barrier active. Now, I went back and forth on this, and I think lucky hit, the aspect of fortune is the way to go, because we don't have damage without, well, the ice spikes rather do give us like a little bit of extra damage, but we're primarily looking at our X-Fall procs, and the more often we can proc them, no matter how small, the more consistent our offense is. So we go with fortune. So, wow, really? I have not rerolled that strength away, huh? Wow, I am... What? Also, there's an argument for having frozen orb on your gloves. Now, the gloves that are in the link in the description below do not have frozen orb on it. We do have it as one of our enchants so that we can toss frozen orbs, freeze more things, CC more things, apply vulnerable more frequently. But the point is, it also damage. It's just a little bit extra damage that's still popping up there, and it felt like a waste not to pump more into that. So, dealer's choice. We don't need the extra damage, but again, that's a thing I might rethink once the new event comes out. For our weapons, we've got the Storm Swell aspect as well as the aspect of conceited aspect. I can never read that correctly. Anyway, my Storm Swell wand is pretty terrible. We want critical strike, yes. We want damage to burning enemies, yes. We do not want mastery damage, and all stats is fine, I guess, but I'd rather have... Actually, you know what? Another damage roll. Int. We don't really need more int. We have the int. We have the int to keep our resistances up. So, probably just another damage roll on that. For our offhand or focus, I like critical strike, cooldown reduction, lucky hit, and lucky hit while you have a barrier. Anyway, for our bling bling things, we've got X-Files Corroded Signet and Talarash's Iridescent Loop. I believe both... No, that's not true. I'm pretty sure Jafal is from Duriel, while Talarash's is from that guy. The guy that's beside the Tree of Whispers. What's his name? Oh yeah, that guy, Echo of Varshan. So, you know, farm those guys up. And for our necklace, we have the Glacial Aspect. Wow, our rolls are very defensive here. We do not need the free ranks in Mastery. I prefer cooldown as well as mana cost reduction to make our blizzards more easy to spam. And we do want to spam them for more frost, more spikes, and more X-Fall procs. Now, there is an argument against putting total movement speed on your glacial on your neck, but I prefer it just for the little bit of extra critical strike chance applied via our Esu's boots. We want to be as consistent as possible. Even with like every lucky hit chance at maximum roll on your stuff, you're not going to have 150% lucky hit chance on your Blizzard or your Firebolt, which is the only way to make Jafal's 100% proc chance. So instead of, since we can't do that, we may as well add in movement speed to make sure that every time that Jafal procs, we have a massive probability of critting. Also, you could also just add more lucky hit while a barrier is active, but I think since we can't get movement speed on a lot of places, you can put that there. And movement speed also makes it easier to dodge stuff. I have felt the sting of not having enough movement speed. It is, I think, you know what? Yes, it's great for dodging stuff, but most importantly, it is boring. So, most of the time, I'm not going to recommend movement speed because I cannot in good conscience say that, but here I have an excuse and it's more critical strike chance. Unsurprisingly, it is time for the Seneschal, and unsurprisingly, it is Flash of Adrenaline and Tempest. Oh boy, oh wow, what grouch daring today, aren't we? Ooh, Flash of Adrenaline with Fortified Duration and Tactical, big surprise, or one of the uniques, the one that increases its value by 150%, yay. But for Tempest, we don't need the guaranteed vulnerable because we have like a ton of ways to apply vulnerable, from our Frost Nova to our beautiful, beautiful lightning spears to, what the, something is exploding outside, to our frozen orbs. There we go. I remember. I have a brain. So we put on efficiency support as our third node, besides safeguard support and arcing support. Okay, great. Time for skills and paragons. Take it away, over Pat. There are a few new things, at least with this build, that aren't usually what I do, but here we go. 2 points into Firebolt for the burning because we're gonna set things on fire and hope for an X-Fall proc there. 5 points into Frozen Orb because it is still an alternate source of damage, and something that I'm arguing about whether or not to have Frozen Orb on my gloves. If we take this down, we'll see that the growth for damage is pretty high, 4% per rank, and 3% for the not the explosion, just the blah, 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 the spitting orb part. So it's not nothing. And it gives us a tangential, or sorry, an additional way to deal damage. Of course, we're going to go for Enhanced Frozen Orb, which I guess exists, and Greater Frozen Orb to give people vulnerable. Because most of our vulnerable sources, and by most I mean like this guy, excuse me, I'm going to try not to drill more burps into this. I mean, that guy is like not guaranteed, except for like our Frozen Frost Nova, but that's not always going to be a thing. Sometimes we're going to cast that defensively, not to make things vulnerable, or cast it just to create a barrier, which I guess counts as defensive. The point is, Greater Frozen Orb, pretty extra thing. If you find yourself running out of mana a lot, even with our Tie Balls, you can always switch this to Destructive Frozen Orb, because we're going to freeze a lot of things, and it gives you some mana back. Same for our Frost Nova, but we'll talk about that later. 1 point into Potent Warding just to get that extra maximum resistance for just a little bit. That 1% may count for something, although if you don't want it there, bye-bye. There you go. Because we already have our stuff maxed out, so this doesn't really give us too much value, but you can remove it. You can also try to max it out a little bit, take out some points from, say, here, because +3 maximum resistance to that element is not nothing. Anyway, but I'm going to keep it at 1. I like just having that little bit of resist, and just in case we run into things that lower our resistance every time we get hit, that this Potent Warding could save us a lot. 1 point to Flame Shield into Mystical Flame Shield for the reduced mana cost, and that might seem like a waste. A lot of people just don't. They just go for the 1 point, but I like the ability to spam sometimes, especially when I'm invulnerable. Like, this is the moment. This is the moment. You're immune. You can just sit there for, let's say, 1.5 seconds throwing out blizzards because you're not getting hurt. So you can place them properly, angle yourself properly, and so forth. Also, the extra movement speed to improve our SUs is very, very nice. 5 points into Teleport for the extra lowered cooldown, because at 1 point, it is 6.72 seconds. We cut off an entire second for 4 points, and that seems like a lot, but it is very much worth it for me, because 1, our arraignment increases its cooldown, and 2, the faster we can throw this out, the more often we can group things up, because arraignment does not have a cooldown. Anyway, Shimmering Teleport, of course, for the damage reduction, because we're going to be using this offensively. 3 points at the Glass Cannon for the extra damage. That's a lot of extra damage. We are taking a bit more, but we do have a lot of CC, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Elemental Attunement, just to have a shot at cooling down one of our 4 defensive abilities, by the way, which is great because we're running Tactician, which gives us damage whenever we cast a defensive ability. Ice Armor into Enhanced Ice Armor for the little bit of, mana regeneration. Frost Nova into Mystical Frost Nova for the vulnerable application. But again, if you're not really concerned about vulnerable, just slip it into this. The extra mana is always welcome. Alternatively, you can move some points around to put it into this, because this actually gives you a lot of mana regen. Like, you could remove this and put it here and you wouldn't have too much of a trouble. But I like this, 1, because we can use it against bosses, and bosses are really where we have problems, because we are a Sorc, and bosses don't count as being CC'd a lot of the time. 30 points into Precision Magic, because we are running a Shifal, and Shifal loves Lucky Hit. 1 point into Lightning Spear. I took out the 2 points that lead into Invoked Lightning Spear, because of the way stuns can provoke monsters into becoming unstoppable, like to keep us from CC chaining them. And that's a problem, because sometimes it stuns things on screen, and then we walk up to them and, oh my god, they are already kicking our ass. And because we can't, stun them, and we weren't focusing our damage on them. That's not great. So just the potential to apply vulnerable, thank you. 1 point into Align the Elements, because it is friends with Mana Shield, which gives us down reduction, and protection, which gives us protection, a barrier. This does not stack, by the way. If you keep casting like cooldowns, it does not like increase the barrier. It is the same amount. They don't stack on top of each other because they're all the same source protection. 1 point into don't ignore these, because my amulet is it's my meteor amulet, and I'm not willing to reroll the meteor out of that, or the mastery amulet rather. Anyway, into Mage's Blizzard, of course, for the extra duration, which no longer requires us to have over 50% mana, I think. So that's a neat buff for it. 3 points into Devouring Blaze, as well as her amulet booster to give it 42% extra critical strike damage. Multiplicative, of course. Scroll down over here. 1 point into a Permafrost, because we don't really deal damage with our skills. It is all Shifal and Ice Spikes, and neither of them are skills. 3 points into Horror Frost, because it just increases our damage period against Chilled and Frozen. 3 points into Icy Touch for the increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies, and of course Frigid Breeze to allow us to generate a little bit of extra mana while we are going our business. Again, if you're not expecting to fight a boss, this is perfectly fine. We're going to set a lot of things on fire, because one of our enchantments is Firebolt, and the other one is Frozen Orb, but I probably explained that already. The point is, this is a perfectly viable option. That is a lot of extra mana regeneration that is almost always active. Anyway, I gave up on trying to play with these. It's really just Avalanche. There's a small build out there. You just take that out. Like, that's an idea. Like, your Blizzard's not supposed to cause damage anyway, so you don't care. And Shatter doesn't do anything. Because freeze has to expire, so it doesn't work on bosses, and it doesn't work when they die. Overflowing and maybe Virus if you want to use the aspect with it, because it still applies the damage reduction to you. Esu? And then somehow slip in an Esu's aspect to cast stuff faster? Combustion so that you waste a point? It's this. It's fine. It'll do. Okay, it's time for Paragons. And now we gotta start with something that's gonna... I guess it's the first thing you'd remove if you don't feel that it's worth it. Winter. The good news about Winter is that the way to apply its extra 15x damage is very easy. You chill or freeze an enemy, which we're gonna be doing a lot. The problem with this is it does not work on bosses because you do not chill or freeze a boss. So, I think if we're running the new event that is coming out March 5, you don't want to run Winter, even though it's nice. You might want to run Exploit instead. The good news is they're both decks, so you can just slot in the Exploit and like, hey, look, it's working. You get up to 10x damage as well, and that's fine. And then do that. You're good. You're good. You're great. You're great, basically. Yeah, I don't like Adept for us because while it does make the area slightly bigger, what it doesn't matter. Like the bonus, like we're spending a lot of points to gain damage to our mastery skill, which is Blizzard, that we don't really use for damage. So no thank you. We go on straight up into Frigid. Are there 7? There's 7. No, this is 8 Paragons. Anyway, Frigid Fate, because it's, it applies extra damage to our explosions. You can probably jack up that number a bit more. The good news about Frigid Fate, by the way, which we do pick, is that it reads non-physical damage. Non-physical damage counts as bonus damage with cold, so there's that. You can already squeeze that a bit more with a different build, but I think this is where I want to stretch the build. Anyway, Tactician, I'm not going to struggle for that extra 6%, basically. Tactician, here to give us extra vulnerable damage as well as extra cold resistance, which is important and allows us to just slot in 2 diamonds into our rings, so that we get max resists and a little bit. Then we go on to the left, where we pick up the Enchantment Master, and then we socket Elementalist to improve everything, not just the rare nodes or magical nodes, everything that is non-physical. So we improve our resistance to all elements, our non-physical damage. I mean, you can remove the decks here if you want, it's fine, and move that around. We also picked up Ruinous and Elementalist for the extra life as well as extra non-physical damage, further boosting Frigid Fate, which is the only legendary node we will be taking. Anyway, you don't need to max this out, you just need to get 40 points in intelligence. I also picked up the extra resistances for the extra defense. Then we head on straight up into Burning Instinct to get the extra damage against burning enemies as well as Smoldering Embers, which is damage reduction from burning enemies, and most things will be on fire when they're beside us. Is that all the... yeah, that's all the dex nodes. We also put on Destruction here for the extra critical strike damage, which is one of our primary stats. Then we head on to the left for Searing Heat, where we put on Reinforced because I want more fire damage, because that affects our Ishifal fire explosions. Although, if you want... no, you know what? No. You get less crit damage for this. I don't want to trade the crit damage for a little bit of extra damage against burning enemies. This is fine. Extra fire resistance, of course, is also nice. I picked up some of the nodes here just to activate like stuff like this. Like we're barely making it to cinders. So if you find that you have like a bunch of all stats in your gear, you can remove some of the stat nodes that aren't in the way and readjust them as you want them. And moving on up to Static Search, which we're running into the drugs here. Like we're just picking up stats. I don't want to be against damaged enemies, and I don't need the extra lightning resistance. So we'll just pick up Control here and give it as much dex as we can. This is getting weird. And then we go way back to Frigid Fate, then head on up, picking up these 2 things. 1, the Cold Resist, 2, the Lucky Hit chance. Those are pretty nice, because we love Lucky Hit. And then we drop a Flame Feeder for extra damage against burning enemies. Both. I believe the Ishifal explosion counts as extra direct damage. Yeah, because it's an explosion rather than a damage over time effect. So, yay. Okay, great. That's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Blizzard's still very much valuable in Season 3, if not one of the top tier things you can run. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you use it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, do all those nice things and more. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. I am Patinator, and I We'll see you later.